Hi, I'm Katrina Webb, founder of New Day and your podcast host. In each episode, we'll speak with ambitious leaders from around the world who are creating meaningful change and inspiring leadership for the greater good. Their stories will spark your own leadership journey and offer practical tools to help you lead with purpose and impact. Hello and welcome to the New Day podcast. I'm your host, Katrina Webb, and so honoured to have you here. And our guest is someone whose work deeply resonates with the kind of leadership we believe in at New Day, leadership that comes from within. Now, Megumi Miki is the author of Quietly Powerful, How Your Quiet Nature is Your Hidden Leadership Strength. She's an award-winning speaker, leadership consultant, and a powerful advocate for redefining what good leadership looks, sounds, and feels like. Now, Megumi invites us to challenge long-held assumptions about power, presence, and success, and to make space for quieter voices to be seen, heard, and valued. Her own journey navigating cultural identity, introversion, and corporate expectations makes her perspective both personal and profoundly relatable. Megumi, welcome. It's a joy to have you here on our New Day podcast.
Thank you, Katrina. It's so nice to be here, especially given that I interviewed you to be part of the book. So Katrina brings a lot of this quietly powerful leadership as well. So really lovely to be here.
It was an honour to be a part of that book, and it's been a great success, Megumi. Tell us about, the impact the book's had.
Yeah, so the book won a couple of awards, which was just amazing. I was, the first one was like a shock because I wasn't expecting it at all. And it was actually the Australian Career Book Awards. And this person who convenes the award kept on hassling me, saying, you should put it in, you should put it in. I'm going, oh, no, it wouldn't win an award. And then I put it in at the last minute after he hassled me 5 times. And then it won. It's like, oh, what? So it was crazy. And the book's been really helpful in getting people to just think about the idea itself. So even if people don't read the book, people go, oh, okay. And what I really like to do with the book is not only have quieter people read it, but the people who are not so quiet to appreciate the quietly powerful leaders and people who are quieter, how they can become even better versions of themselves. So it's been great.
Wonderful. Well, congratulations on that. And I'm really keen to get into some of the learnings of that book. But I'd love to start with your story and, where your interest with leadership, but also this notion of being quietly powerful has come from.
Sure. My interest in leadership really came from a time when I started working in ANZ and they started this cultural transformation program. And I was invited to a workshop, 3-day offsite workshop. And I was blown away by how little I knew actually about leadership, let alone personal leadership. And so I just fell in love with the idea of actually you can work on yourself and develop and really find yourself. And so that was my journey of, oh my God, I was living my life based on other people's expectations, particularly my parents. And I realized, wow, I can actually find myself. So that was a big journey. And I joined the team, this cultural transformation team. And as part of that, there was so much training in personal development, leadership, and so on. So that really helped me to find who I was and use everything that I've got rather than trying to pretend to be somebody else. So that was certainly a starting point. But I still found that in the team, I'd say 80-90% of the team were very loud and gregarious. So I was a little bit on the outer. And I often felt like I wasn't good enough and I wasn't as good as some of my very entertaining colleagues. And there was a moment of quite a few years down the track where I was quite experienced as a facilitator, but I co-facilitated with a colleague who was the opposite of me. And I remember distinctly when he started off the workshop and he had the whole group in fits of laughter in the first 2 minutes. And I was sitting there going, oh, I love him to bits. He's amazing. But I was sitting there going, oh my God, I'm going to be so boring. I'm going to disengage the group. And I had all this chatter in my head, as you can imagine. And I was thinking, oh, what am I going to do? And then I got up and did my bit, and it was absolutely fine. I just did my bit. And then during the break, a colleague who knew me quite well came over and said, what's going on, Megumi? You're not quite yourself today. And I told her, I said, oh, I felt like I wasn't as good as my colleague and I was, boring and all of this. And she looked me in the eye and said, Megumi, the fact that the two of you are so different is what makes it amazing. And, if you don't bring your best, your version of your best, then people are missing out. And, not everybody's going to resonate with your colleague. So I thought, okay. And so that was the moment, I suppose, where I thought, like, I intellectually knew that I should bring myself, but that was the moment I thought, okay, I really do need to work on this. And that was the seed that started the thought of, okay, maybe I need to investigate a little bit more. And what really helped me was to interview people like yourself. And I ended up interviewing 29 for the book, and I've interviewed more since. So I've actually interviewed about nearly 50 of these quietly powerful leaders who've been successful in their fields in their own way, using their quiet nature. And that gave me so much conviction about how incredibly powerful this different style can be. And all the 50 leaders have their own unique styles, but this common thread of not being in your face and overbearing and dominating is definitely the common theme. And yeah, it's been a very rewarding process to get to that. And so, yeah, about 2016, I think it was, I started this idea of quietly powerful. And yeah, so I interviewed lots of these leaders, wrote the book, and I've been doing speaking and group coaching sessions and individual coaching sessions, and now more so organizational programs where some organizations realize that they could benefit from having their quieter talent join a program like this. And also, I invite the managers to get involved so they learn about the power that they can bring. And that's been so rewarding because it shifts the system, not just the individuals. So that's been my work more recently.
Wow. Well, thank you so much in that. There's so much in that, Megumi. I'd love to go back to that moment where, that I suppose that self-criticism was high.
Mm,
Where you had
mm,
that negative self-talk of I'm not good enough, or I don't look like this, or
mm.
I'm not going to be, people aren't going to listen to me, or I'm not going to be funny or entertaining enough. How did that feel? And did people try and give you, some feedback to become louder, or like, yeah, because I'm sure there's people listening right now that are going, oh my
Uh,
gosh, I've never appreciated that I'm actually quiet, and I can
yeah,
be a quietly powerful leader.
yeah. Well, as you can imagine, in the context of public speaking or facilitation, as well as leadership, I think to a degree. I mean, when you're facilitating, you're leading a group. In that context, there is a perception that you need to be loud, entertaining, gain attention, and things like that. So if I think back to a few years before that incident where I really sort of realized that I need to work on myself and be okay with myself and my style, we had this facilitator training for quite a few years. And I remember one time where the person who was teaching us said, you need to bring more energy. And so I thought, okay, I'm going to muster up all the energy I've got. And we were practicing in front of our peers. And so I went up the front and I walked like I meant it. And I tried to be energetic, use my hands. And then the feedback I got was, Megumi, you're not being yourself. It's like, what do I do? So I think the challenge is it's a different kind of energy, I think, and that's what I've learned over time. So my energy is not the waving hands and all of that, but it's actually almost like a full presence. And, you've seen me talk in front of groups. And I think what I try to bring is I'm fully there, fully with the group and connecting with the group. So I think that's what I try and do as a quieter person, not the not the crazy energy.
You must have been exhausted after doing that as
Oh,
well.
totally.
So, so you've given us this beautiful presence, and to try and be with the group that you're with.
Yeah.
What other traits? I mean, you've said you've interviewed around over 50 people now. If you were to list some traits of what quietly powerful people do well,
Mm.
what would they be?
There's lots of superpowers that I list in the book, actually. And the number one superpower that every single quietly powerful leader mentioned was listening. And I think listening is so underrated because what listening does is it helps the person who's speaking to feel like they matter, that they're heard and they're seen. And that builds trust, which is everything in relationships, as you can imagine. So that is helpful in leadership because when you build that trust, people will do all sorts of things for you. And so it's an incredibly powerful leadership strength that every single leader spoke about. And by the way, quieter people don't necessarily listen well. So a couple of them actually admitted that they weren't great listeners because there's a lot going on in their
Yeah.
head. Yeah. So they one of them in particular admitted that they had to learn to be a better listener. And so they started to really notice what was going on in their minds and make sure that they could put it aside and be present with the person they're speaking with. So that was really great that she was very honest about that. And if I was honest with myself, I definitely noticed times when I haven't been a great listener. And still sometimes I catch myself going, oh, where was I just then? So, but yeah, they just said that that is one skill, if there's anything as a leader, is really critical. So
Mm.
there's lots of other things like bringing a calming influence is another one that some leaders talked about. And one leader actually said because she was quieter and thoughtful, even though she was stressed out on the outside, it appeared as if she was bringing calm. And I think that sort of thoughtful approach brings calm, regardless of how that person's feeling. But of course, other people talked about how they could be calm on the inside and outside. So that is very helpful, particularly in stressful situations. This one leader was talking about it in the context of a business closure. So it was very stressful for everybody. And she found that her thoughtful approach was very helpful in bringing calm. So yeah, there's not lots of skills like that or superpowers like that that I think brings a lot of benefit to the groups that they're leading.
Wonderful. So, listening in that great sense of calm. What about working with people? Are quietly powerful people wanting to work on their own, or are they people that tend to want to collaborate more? Is there a pattern in the people that you've interviewed, Megumi?
So in terms of people who want to work more individually,
Yeah, or collaborating with others, and
yeah,
are they more individual driven, or is there more a collaborative approach?
I think it's a mixture, Katrina, actually. So I think a few of them said just because they're quieter or they feel that they're introverted, it doesn't mean that they're not interested in people. So some people might be less interested. So there's I think the danger is that we label people as
Yes.
introverted and think it's a certain way, but there's so many variations as human beings are very complex, so you can't pigeonhole them in a particular way. So some of them talked about how they love being with people. It's just that they can't be with people all the time. They just get exhausted. Um, so it's more that some of them just interested in people in a one-on-one more than groups because they get more energy from that. Um, so in terms of collaborating, I think there was a range of responses in terms of some people loved working with people one-on-one. If they like to work with the group, they would often, actually, one of them talked about their process of influencing was not the sort of stereotypical having a persuasive speech. It's more working with individuals and understanding their concerns and issues and working through that and then collectively coming to a conclusion. So I think that's the way they often collaborated in terms of working with other people. But of course, the benefit of quieter people, some people don't mind working on their own either. So I think it's being able to do both, which is really helpful.
Someone once described to me, Megumi, a really simple explanation around introversion and extroversion, where it means that you still all like people, that
Mm.
when you're an introvert, your people meter gets full quicker.
Yes, yes,
And extroverts, it takes quite a long time for their people meter to get
yes,
full. And so I really like that explanation because there is a trap that people can think introverts actually don't really like people. In
yeah,
fact, they do. It's just that their people meter gets full a lot quicker and they need that time
yeah.
to check out to re-energize themselves.
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And I think some people do prefer to be on their own more. So, or they have a smaller circle of friends, family, etc., and that's all they want to hang around with. But and then other people are different. They like yourself. You love being with people from all around the world. So I think that's very different from person to person.
Wonderful. I'd love to go into listening a bit more, seeing though you
Mm,
brought that up as the number one, well, maybe the first thing that came to mind for you.
mm.
We've been so fortunate enough to have you not only as a guest speaker at New Day a few years ago, and then we invited you back because of your popularity and people, the impact that you had on your first keynote with our summits. People wanted you to come back, and last year we did something extraordinary with you. We had you pop in and out the day to do some really good reflection, but also to practice people's listening skills. So could you give us some tips on, what you've learned that can help people that might be listening to this to go, okay, I know that's an area that I could get better at. What are some ways in which we can experiment, try different things to deepen our listening?
Sure. I really enjoyed the sessions that we ran last year. It was little short 10-minute sessions, so it was really good to do. And everybody was involved and they wanted to do these practices. So some of the practices I remember we did, and I think they were really good practical tips, is just being aware of what's going on when you're in conversation. So, of course, being present with the person, but what's going on in your mind. We often talk, when we talk about distractions, we think of external distractions, about phones and the noise and things like that. But often the biggest distraction is in here. So I think being able to notice that is definitely the first thing. But the other noticing exercise that we did was about I don't actually remember the terminology, but it was when you listen and respond, is it a self-focus or is it I think it might have been support response? And I remember people were chuckling afterwards saying, oh my God, I was so self-focused. So the self response is when you listen to somebody and you basically make the topic yourself. So, so if we're talking about quietly powerful leadership and you're sharing something, I go, oh well, I'm like this and I'm like that, and my experience has been like this, as opposed to a support response would be, tell me more about when you said this and what do you mean by that, and really staying with the person you're listening to. So I think there's a big difference in the experience of the person speaking when you do that, because you're staying engaged with the person who's speaking. So that makes a big difference.
A huge difference instead of thinking about what can I add to this. And we
Yeah,
probably maybe do it because we're trying to hotwire the connection or show
yeah,
people that there's a connection between us, and I've
yeah,
done it too.
yeah,
But we can do that maybe after we have
yes,
that supporting response to be curious and deepen our interest in that
yeah,
person to want to hold the space for them
yeah,
before we then go on to hotwire. Is that right?
yeah. Yeah, well, it's a balance. I mean, you
Balance.
can definitely involve yourself in it to make that connection. But if you just did that, then you miss out on the opportunity to learn about the other person and dig a bit deeper. And on the receiving end, now that I'm so aware of it, I notice that when somebody else does the self response to me. It's like, oh, but I haven't finished explaining myself, and then the whole thing's gone over to them. So
Oh,
yeah.
have you learned a good skill when you are in that space, Megumi, to not, I suppose, get upset or then retreat? Because sometimes that can be the response to, or they don't care. It's gone
Mm,
to then, no, I'm not going
mm,
to share anymore because they've shifted the focus.
mm,
Have you got a nice way of reframing it so
mhm,
you can bring the attention back to yourself without
mhm,
making it awkward?
mhm. It's a really good question because I used to think, oh my God, they're not interested. And, and I get, yeah, definitely kind of not shut down. That maybe that's a bit extreme, but it's like, well, I won't bother sharing too much then, was my natural response. But I think what I started to do more of, one is realize that it's a skill and it's not a very used skill. So it's not very common and people aren't aware. So it's not like they're doing it on purpose. So I tell myself that. And a way to just engage back is to model it, to do the support response with them, and then inject my bit from time to time. And also with my louder friends and colleagues, if they talk 80% and I talk 20%, I'm okay with that now. It's like, oh well, they're lost.
That's true, and you've just been entertained as well in a good
Yes, that's right.
way.
That's right.
Oh, that's fantastic, Megumi. And I remember a friend sharing this story with me. She was new to an organization and she was sitting in on the meeting, a new leader, and taking it all in and hadn't said too much for quite some time in the meeting. And somebody then, took the attention and said to this person, "You haven't done much in the meeting. Are you going to say anything? Or you haven't
Wow.
contributed much," was the
Yeah.
response. And her response back, which was beautiful, and she's a quietly powerful leader, she said, "I've contributed a lot. I've been listening."
Beautiful.
And I really love that story because to
Yeah.
take the time to listen is a huge contribution. And
It
often
is.
when you're quieter and you're taking it all in, people think you aren't contributing.
Yeah. Yeah. That is a very common assumption, and people get told you need to speak up more. And then what's really interesting when I've been working with people is when people get told to speak up more, they stress about the fact that they haven't spoken up, and therefore they lose their presence because they're worried in their heads, going, "Oh, I haven't said anything," and so then they lose their listening and their presence, and so they're contributing less.
Yes.
So I often work with people about just get comfortable with the fact that you're going to be quieter, and from time to time you do need to say something when it's important to do so. But if you get comfortable, then you're more present, and then you can contribute something more higher quality.
Have you seen any other, with coaching individuals, Megumi, have you seen any other, I suppose, maybe whether we call it traps or areas that quietly powerful people could, that you've helped them to work on those particular areas?
I think the biggest trap is that we buy into this idea that quiet is not powerful.
Mm.
And so we internalize that from lots of different sources, whether it's, when you're a child, you got told to, go out and be more social, or you got told in your workplace that you need to speak up more or be more confident is another one. That people assume that when you're quiet, you're not confident. So that's another assumption and barrier that we can start to internalize. So often in my keynotes, and I think I talk about it in the book, this idea called internalized marginalization. So we internalize the messages that is of marginalizing in nature, and so we hold on to it. Or even in the media, I've read articles and seen some videos saying this person was successful despite being quiet or despite being an introvert. So that's like a little subtle put down, isn't it? And so we start to internalize that, going, oh, I have to work harder because I'm quieter or something like that. And so internalizing all of that ends up being become an internalized voice for ourselves saying, oh, I'm too quiet to do something, or I'm my introversion is going to hold me back, or it's a disadvantage. And so that mindset or that belief can become a trap.
Mhm.
So one of the first things that I do in my coaching and group coaching and programs is about recognizing that voice or that belief and really challenge it. So yeah, I think that's the most important thing actually.
Fantastic, Megumi. What would you say then, because you've worked with individuals and you also work with a lot of organizations, what would be some of the, if we even talk about that word, traps for organizations that maybe
Mm,
they're not even realizing that they're doing, but what are some of the areas that you can point out if
mm,
people are listening and they're leading teams or
mhm,
running organizations to know that these aren't blind spots, and if they're aware of them, that they could really help get everyone's leadership style, but also voice to be heard.
mhm. Yeah, there's lots of traps. Because I think this assumption is so ingrained. So in terms of selecting people to promote or put into leadership positions, there's a big assumption about you need to be visible, vocal, and confident looking. And, often you hear about people being interviewed and saying, oh, they interviewed really well, or, oh, they seemed really nervous in an interview. So they base their decision on the interview. And you think, well, are they actually going to be performing in an interview in their role? I'm not so sure about that. And I often tell this story in my keynotes about this woman that I knew who was a quieter leader, and she was very influential, but in a quiet way. But people didn't notice that, and they did this leadership assessment center that she had to go through, where they assess people in a 1 day event, and they do group discussions, and she had to do a presentation, and she was all nervous, and they said she had no leadership potential. And you think, but I saw her in action. She was influencing senior stakeholders. She rallied about 100 leaders to manage this transformation program. And so, yeah, it's a flawed mechanism of assessing potential. And I read about the overlap between confidence and competence. I think I might have mentioned this in the past. Dr. Thomas Chemera-Premazik, who's an organizational psychologist, refers to this study that the overlap is only 9%.
Wow.
Yeah. So if you're assessing people based on confidence, he says, well, confidence is just your own perception of how good you are. It's not necessarily reality. So there's people who are overconfident and there's people who are underconfident. And there's only 9% who can accurately assess their own capability. So
Wow.
yeah, you can't base it on that.
Absolutely. Why do you think it's so ingrained, Megumi? Like when you're
Mm,
writing the book and doing the research, why do we have this, culture of wanting to have an extrovert or the loudest or the most energetic person be in the leadership position?
mm. Maybe I don't have a really clear answer about that. I only have a few hypotheses, but I wonder if there's a perception that leadership is supposed to be about leading from the front and being able to motivate people. It's kind of the Tony Robbins rah-rah type.
Mhm.
Is It has become a bit ingrained. I don't know, maybe in with media and things that you see, and even the movies or whatever you see leadership as that. So maybe we've sort of internalized that prototype. Um, the other thing I would say is this idea of what we perceive to be confidence as well. So we don't notice the quiet confidence as much. And so perhaps that's one of the aspects. And I wondered sometimes in more quieter cultures, if you like, there's actually a woman who wrote a book about quiet cultures. So that got me thinking, um, in the Japanese culture or some of the Asian cultures, they might appreciate that quieter confidence a bit more, or they notice it a bit more.
Mm.
They also value humility more than some other cultures. So there might be a cultural element to it as well.
Mm.
Um, Not to say that I think maybe even in Japan you might see that the louder types might be listened to more. I'm not sure,
Mhm.
but there's a term or something that I came across called the awestruck effect, where we just become in awe of people who have that charisma and big presence and things like that. And apparently, according to this piece that I read, and I think there's research behind it, where when you're in awe of a person like that, we stop thinking rationally. It's an emotional thing, and so when we're emotionally hooked, we don't rationally think, are they actually making sense or are they? I actually had an interesting experience of going to a talk by two people, two American, I won't name them, but they're two quite famous people. And one was a very loud and entertaining kind of person, the other was a quieter person. And something I noticed was the amount of notes that I took. So the louder, entertaining person was half a page, the other one was 2 pages. So if you think about the substance, there
Yes.
might be a little bit more, but because of the awestruck effect, perhaps we don't really logically think about it.
Yes. Oh, that's really interesting, Megumi.
Mm.
And do you coach? I'm sure you coach everybody. So, in terms of if you are coaching extroverts, people that are loud and entertaining, which is a wonderful skill as well,
Yeah,
what have been some of the tips that have helped them to find that nice balance?
I think well, first thing is, as you said, they're wonderful traits, and I definitely say don't change that and don't lose it. But I think the first thing that's really helpful is to be aware of the impact that they're having. So, especially if they're in a leadership position, if their gregariousness or dominance or whatever, and they have a leadership position, they've got the power impact as well, the hierarchical positional power. To notice if people go really quiet and they don't say anything and they're not engaging or they're afraid to say something, then you've got a problem.
Hmm.
So then you have to really call on your quieter side, because everybody's got a quieter side. It's not like everybody's one side or the other. So just call on that quieter side just to listen a little bit more, to ask a few more questions, share a little bit of some of your mistakes or weaknesses or a bit of vulnerability so that it makes it okay for other people to share the space as well. So I think there's definitely some tricks and tips around toning your dominance down, especially when you want to hear from people and get better at questions. Because I remember there was a leader that I coached a long time ago. He kept on saying, "Why aren't people speaking to me?" And I watched him in action in a group setting, and he'd say, "Well, what do you think?" It's
Mm.
a very general question.
Yeah,
So I worked with him on,
heard a lot
get
actually.
better at more specific questions.
Yeah, I do hear that a lot from louder or more extroverts, energized speakers. And as like someone who's quieter, they'll say, "Okay, so what do you think?"
Yeah,
And then all of a sudden, no one answers anything.
yeah.
Or the extrovert will wait a moment, and because the quieter people are like, "Oh, gee, that's it.
Yes,
That's I actually now you're asking me what am I thinking? I'm thinking a lot.
yeah.
Now I need to work
Yeah,
out
what part of it do you
what
wanna
part,
know?
yeah. And so then I watch the room, the extroverts wait and they go, okay, okay, if no one else is
Yeah.
going to speak. Yeah, that's wonderful, Megumi. So what could though, like how more specific can we be? Like what sort of questions as someone who is quietly powerful,
Mm,
what do you appreciate instead of what do you think? Is there any questions? Because good questioning is really important.
it
Can
is.
we give people examples of some good quality questions that if you're not
Mm,
used to asking them,
mm,
here are three that Megumi would suggest.
mm. I think pick a segment of the topic you're discussing and saying, I'm really interested in your take on X. And especially if you knew they have an expertise on a particular field, then gear towards that. I think that's a really useful thing to do. And also validates the person too, to say, oh, Katrina, I know that you're really an expert in X, so I'd love to hear your take on it on this topic. So that would be a good way, and also easier way for them to start. Because I think something that I know for myself is if I start, I can keep going. But if I'm given this broad question of what do you think, and exactly as you said, oh, where do I start? Then I might go quiet for a while. Actually, the other tip is to let a little bit of silence
Mm, mm.
stay. So, often the noisier people don't like silence. Just
Yes.
get a little bit more comfortable with 5 seconds of silence.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Have you got any other tools and tips for helping to make sure everyone, gets a voice? I know something that I enjoy doing is
Mm,
making sure that sticky notes are available and making sure that not every chance of giving feedback has to be verbal, or
yeah.
making sure people can write down first, pop it up on a wall, and then we can have a discussion about that.
Yeah.
Have you found that to work? And have you got any other tips that people could add to their repertoire to make sure
Mm,
that everyone does get heard, seen, and valued?
mm, for sure. So I think there's a before, during, and after a conversation. So if you can give people a heads up beforehand, whether it's an agenda or whether it's some questions that you want people to come prepared, I think that's really helpful so that people have some thoughts with them before they come along, especially people who like to think before they speak. And I like the idea of the sticky notes or some other way to gather ideas and information. And then the after, to be okay with people coming up to you afterwards or invite them to come up afterwards. Because I know for myself, I often have a conversation and afterwards go, oh, I should have said this. And so all the good ideas come afterwards. So, I often email afterwards and say, oh, I thought of this afterwards. So being okay with that.
Oh, that is great, isn't it? To say, if anyone has got any feedback, please, you've taken the time to think about it, please
Yeah.
email me afterwards. It doesn't mean that we've finished in this session.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
think for big decisions as well for businesses and organizations, if there's a really important decision that you want people to have an input into, make sure you have at least two meetings. So one to think about and discuss, and then the second one to make the decision. Don't do it in the one meeting because, yeah, people would, if it's a really important decision, people would want to think about it.
Yeah, that's wonderful, Megumi. What about, as people have been listening to this
Mm,
podcast, and I know the impact that you've had on stage, and obviously with the winning awards for your book, you've really brought attention for a lot of people that might appreciate that they are quieter, and that's okay, and how to own it and really get the best out of your quietly powerful leadership. We've talked about listening and having a presence. What about not at work, just in terms of maybe ways that you might re-energize? If I remember rightly, we talked about this when you interviewed me in the book. What do you do, Megumi, to really nourish that quietly powerful side
mm, mm.
out of work? And that might help
Yeah.
you go, oh, that is me.
Yeah, no, I definitely create space for myself now, more so than I used to. So when I was working a lot more, many more hours, it was harder to do. But now, I think it was you, Katrina, that said that rest or downtime is part of your work.
Yes.
So I think as a consultant and as a speaker and those sort of jobs, you really do need to bring your full energy. So the rest time and downtime is part of the work. So yeah, I definitely put that in place for sure.
Yeah, you're right. I meet with myself,
Yeah.
and create meetings with myself. And
Yes.
Gumi, one of the meetings I have now, which I love, is someone that's come into my life through my children and as a mother of my oldest son's friend.
Mm.
And she has a class on a Monday night each week for an hour, and it's a rest class.
Oh wow.
Yeah, and holding space
Wow.
for women, particularly, to rest and recover through
Oh, wow.
different modalities of sound and
Okay.
meditation. And I love it. You go there, you take all your favorite blankets and
Mhm.
pillows, and you just get really comfortable and close your eyes. And it's this permission
Yeah.
to rest and restore for an
No,
hour.
that's beautiful.
Yeah, and my quietly powerful side absolutely loves it.
I bet. I bet.
Is it?
Yeah, I do yoga, which is helpful. You get the shavasana right at the end, and so you get that little, I know it's a short time, but you still get the rest time. But I also do ballet, which we talked about.
Tell me more about ballet. I love this.
So I kind of think ballet is a quietly powerful art form because nobody speaks.
Yeah.
Like I went to the ballet when I was in Adelaide, watched Sleeping Beauty, and when you know how much energy, athleticism, and strength it takes to pull off what they do, that is so powerful. Yet it's completely quiet, and they're meant to look easy and graceful. That is incredibly quite powerful. So, my daughter was doing it for a long time. She was doing it since she was 3, and I when she started doing it a little bit more seriously with a teacher down the road, she was, thinking for a period of time, she was thinking going professional. She was doing private lessons and things, and I was sitting in the private lessons and I couldn't understand a thing she was saying with all these French words, ballet terminology. I thought, maybe I should learn. So I started doing adult ballet classes just to learn to be able to help her. And then I fell in love with it. So I've been doing it ever since. And now I'm doing more classes than she is because she's not doing ballet quite as much anymore. So I really enjoy it because I actually feel powerful doing the class because it takes so much strength and when you do it properly. And so it is actually my form of keeping strong. And I don't like going to the gym, so that's my gym.
That's great. I find Bikram yoga very similar.
Mm,
In a practice that's 90 minutes, that's hard and
mm,
you feel strong and powerful within it, but
mm,
also that sense of the heat. And I
mhm.
love the fact that you're with people but you don't have to talk to people. You're practicing and you're in your own space as that collective energy.
Yeah,
However, you can restore yourself in a
yeah.
powerful way. So I resonate with that. And one of the things I was thinking about, Megumi, is even though we might say people are quietly powerful, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's quiet on the inside. And
Mhm.
you were talking about before, one of the traps is that you can overthink or you can think all day long. And
Yeah.
I know one of the best practices for many of us to find what works for you is to create space to not just listen to yourself.
Mm,
And so to find an activity where you become present, whether it's through ballet or through a rest
yeah,
class or through yoga or
yeah,
nature, where you can actually quieten your own. Because if you're
yeah,
listening to your voice the whole day, and as we know, our minds like to think all day long,
yeah.
if we let them, that
Mm,
often all we're listening to is our view and ourselves.
yes.
So, how important it is to find, and I'm sure ballet is that, where if your
Oh,
mind
yeah.
starts to wander off into yesterday or tomorrow, that you can't balance, right? Or you can't
Yeah,
create a good performance.
yes. Yeah, no, the challenge with ballet is there's so many things to fix. So
It keeps your
you
mind
gotta do your
busy.
fingers like this and your knees like that and turned out and this, that, the other. So there's so many muscles you don't even realize you have that you have to work with that you have no time to think about anything else.
Oh, I
Yeah, no,
love.
it's actually a very good way to be fully present and engaged in the thing you're doing right now. And you're right. I think if you don't have something like that, and for some people it's cooking, for other people it's art. I know I used to draw and paint for a long time ago, and when I'm absorbed, it's that flow state, isn't it? You're so absorbed that you can't think of anything else. There's nothing else in the world. It's a really restorative and helpful state to have from time to time.
Yeah, very much. Well, I love that conversation, and I love that you mentioned ballet. I hope people are listening, thinking, "Wow, I've never thought about doing that," or "I loved it when I was young. Why not? Why not
Yeah,
doing
yeah,
it
yeah, yeah,
as
yeah.
as you get older?" Megumi, one of the questions we love to ask at New Day is, what does the world need now in terms of leadership?
Mm.
And how would you answer that one?
It's a big question, isn't it, that one?
Mm,
We used to say we need more quietly powerful leaders, and I definitely still believe that, but I think it's a balance. So there are times when you need the bold, brash, dominant type sometimes when something needs to be shaken up. And also you need the quieter, more receptive type leadership to bring people together, to hear different voices. I think it's a bit of a mix. But I think it is still the quieter side is underrepresented, and in the world where it's so complex and things are uncertain, if you're not tapping into that collective wisdom by allowing different voices, I think we're missing a very big chunk of wisdom. So I do think that we need more quietly powerful leaders for sure.
I love that. And for someone, that has been listening today that maybe does feel unseen and unheard at times,
Mm,
and perhaps they are more quiet and reflective, what would you suggest that they think about?
mhm,
Some tools that they could, action straight away? And what would you like them to know?
mm.
Hmm.
Well, read my book. Quietly powerful will be a good one.
It's full of
So
plenty of tools and tips, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. There's quite a few things in the book. I actually talk about three attributes of the quietly powerful leaders. If you can develop that, then you can start to feel like you own your quieter self and bring the best that you can. So the three attributes being getting really comfortable in yourself. So feeling okay with the fact that you have strengths and weaknesses and everything else. Everybody does, and actually flip the idea that some strengths can become a weakness, some weaknesses can become a strength depending on the situation.
Yes.
Um, but getting really comfortable in yourself because that allows you to be more present. And I do believe the presence of a quietly powerful leader, when you can develop that, that is what changes everything
Mm.
because people can feel your presence from before you speak. So you don't even have to speak. And people, when people feel that presence and they feel connected and they feel that warmth, then that makes a huge difference. And that and being comfortable is certainly part of that. So being present and then purposefulness. So or being purposeful. When you have a compelling purpose, whether it's a big life purpose or even a small thing that you really want to fix, then it's easier for you to step outside your comfort zone and stand your ground or whatever you need to do to get things moving. So I think, for example, with my keynote speaking, it's not my favorite thing to do because there's all eyes on me. And it's like, oh my God, I've practiced so much that I feel okay now, but it was certainly not the thing that I liked to do way back when I started. But because I loved the work that I was doing and the impact it was having, that's why I kept going. So that purposefulness, I think, is really key. So those three attributes, as you can develop that, I think will be very, very helpful. So yeah, so I encourage people to have a look at the book. I've also got online courses and the group coaching programs that I run as well.
Wonderful. Yes, we'll make sure your details are there so people can follow and learn and read from you or get you into their organization to run a session or maybe to help coach people to get that beautiful balance. As you said, we all have our quiet part of ourselves and we all
Mm,
can step into being a bit more louder and entertaining
mm,
needed as well.
that's right.
Megumi, thinking back to your young self and younger people when you might see quite
Mm,
younger people, what would your advice be for them and even for people that might be parenting quieter
mm.
people?
That's a great question.
Mm.
It's, because I remember going to a parent teacher interview at school for my daughter, and I distinctly remember one year, I can't remember which year, but it was one year I sat with three different teachers and every single one of them said, "Oh, she's a, wonderful student, very studious, doing really well. I'd wish she'd speak up a bit more though." I want to see a bit more of personality. I'm going, so quiet isn't a personality? So, yes, by the third one, I said, and And they, oh, there's nothing wrong with it. But so, yeah, I had a chuckle inside thinking, you don't know who you're speaking to.
Are you comfortable now to be able to use that as a teaching moment, Megumi?
Yeah, yeah. So by the third one, I thought, yeah, I could actually have a conversation about that.
Yeah.
But for teachers and parents, I think it's a mix of allowing them to be who they are and appreciating their quieter side, but getting better at noticing what they're good at, I think is the important part.
Mhm.
Just because they're not visible or loud or they do things in the background or whatever it is, doesn't mean that they don't have strengths. They have different strengths. And I think if you start to notice that and really help them to harness that, I think is an amazing thing to be able to do as parents and teachers, and at the same time encourage them in little steps to help them to bring themselves out a little bit more from time to time if they are up for it.
Mm.
So not pushing them into it,
Mhm.
but just giving them opportunities to step in if they can. So I think that's also important because, as I say with my programs, there's appreciating fully. So really owning and appreciating what you've got and adapting purposefully. So at times, as you said, Katrina, before in leadership, sometimes you do need to step into a louder role. And so being able to adapt for a purpose is important as well. So if you can encourage kids from time to time to try something, and especially if they're passionate about something, then there's much more opportunity to step into something.
Yes, I've heard people say that before, Megumi, that if you can listen enough to find out what someone's passionate about,
Mm.
they will come to life.
Definitely,
Yeah. Yeah.
definitely. Like
Yeah.
I think about my daughter who was doing ballet for a long time. She competed in competitions, doing solos on stage by herself, all eyes on her judging, and she still loved it, so she did it. So that's for a quieter person. It's pretty brave, and I would never do that.
Yet, let's add
No,
that.
no, 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 no. Please don't even think about
Oh,
it.
Megumi, this has been a great discussion, and I'd love to know, have you got a favorite quote that really resonates with you, particularly on one of the days where you might be needing that little bit of inspiration or motivation? What's one of your favorite quotes that helps you to get the best out of yourself?
Wow. There's
Mm.
lots of quotes that resonate with me, but the one that stayed with me for the longest, and I still keep reminding myself, is what other people think of you is none of your business unless you make it so.
Wow.
Eleanor Roosevelt.
Yeah. Say that
Yeah.
again.
What other people think of you is none of your business unless you make it so, by Eleanor Roosevelt.
Oh, that's a really beautiful quote, isn't it? So powerful.
Mhm.
Megumi, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us today. Thank you for
You
beautiful presence, your depth, your leadership. Your work is a quiet revolution and so needed in a world right now. To our listeners, thanks once again for being here. And as we mentioned, if you'd like to explore Megumi's book, Quietly Powerful, or her workshops, we will make sure her links are in our show notes. So until next time, take the time to maybe pause and reflect and think about leading from who you truly are. This is our New Day podcast. We'll see you again soon. Thanks for tuning in to the New Day podcast. For more inspiration and tools to lead for the greater good, visit newday.world. Keep leading with purpose, and we'll see you next time.